The Vino Geek Podcast, wine from a Kiwi perspective. Over the past month, we've dived deep into what makes New Zealand wine regions special. This week, we're going to talk about which one is the best. We're going to talk about what makes these wine regions stick out above the rest and who that is. Let's find out. What metric do we look at first? Well, we're going to start with obviously global recognition. Now, this hands down goes to Marlborough. While Central Otago is making an imprint in the market, and also Hawke's Bay is a world wine capital, let's be realistic. Marlborough is the undisputed capital of New Zealand wine as far as the international market is concerned. So 1 point to Marlborough. Now, when we look at the climate of the big four, Hawke's Bay, Martinborough, Marlborough and Central Otago, one stands out as being unique and different. Central Otago, with its continental climate, is obviously the exception to the rule. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, it just means it's very different from the others. As far as the others go, obviously there are varying degrees of a maritime climate. So you have Hawke's Bay, which is the warmest. It gets the most heat and the hottest summers. It also has a cooler pocket, but for the most part, it is the warmest. Martinborough, whilst it's not the furthest south out of the other three, probably is cooler than the others, given that it has spring southerlies that just keep the temperature cool. See, and then there's Marlborough, that does have that moderating sea breeze, especially when you're in the Awatere Valley / Kekarengu sub-regions of Marlborough, where they are totally exposed to that southerly wind. So when we're talking about climate for grapes, I would have to go with Hawke's Bay because there is a lot of diversity. They have the inland climate, which is not continental, but it's close enough. And then they've got that super maritime climate and that heat.
Just taking a quick pause in the episode to remind you to like, subscribe, comment, and come and follow me on socials too.
Next, soil. Okay, probably more boring of the subjects we're going to talk about. And really, it's the diversity of soil is probably what we're looking at totally. I mean, Hawke's Bay is mainly river stones. There is layers of topsoil and silt layers on top of the river stones in various parts and gravels and things like this. But it is very, very similar right through. Obviously, pockets of inland, there might be the odd pocket of limestone, but it's very similar. Martinborough is also the same. Very similar, very much those river terraces, those alluvial river terraces. So there's not a lot of diversity there. Then you move down to, we're going to skip Marlborough just for a second. Central Otago, schist, there's obviously layers of silt and loess and the odd bit of quartz and what have you, but Marlborough probably has the most diversity and the most sort of isolated pockets of that diversity. So they have the clay, they have the silt loam, they have river stones, they have they have that diversity and they have them isolated in pockets so they can really hone in on that soil variation. So yeah, another one to Marlborough, so that's two. Next, the grapes grown in each region. So we're going to break this down into a couple of sections. So we're going to have the overall quality of the fruit grown in that area, as well as the sheer volume of and variety grown in each area. So for this is going to take a little bit longer than the average little segment, but I mean, so we'll start in the north again. Hawke's Bay, hands down, has the most diversity of varieties, from all the Bordeaux varieties to Syrah, there's Grenache, there's Tempranillo, there's Barbera, there's Tannat, there's Mourvedre, There's literally the smorgasbord you can think of across the board. They've got it there. Arnaz, Fiano, the list goes on. It's grown in Hawke's Bay. If it's grown in New Zealand, Hawke's Bay has some. So hands down, Hawke's Bay has that. The other regions are very much tied to Pinot Noir as a red, and then a variety of different whites right through. Obviously, there's the odd producer doing some experimental things with different grape varieties, but not to the average overall level of Hawke's Bay. As far as quality of fruit is concerned, this is one that's super hard to quantify. Obviously, given that Martinborough has the super low yielding crops, you've got to give them a nod. But then, the fact that Marlborough has been able to isolate Sauvignon Blanc and really redefine Sauvignon Blanc as far as the world is concerned, that's got to give its props. And then Central Otago, how it creates that juxtaposition, as I've talked about in the past. You've got that intense heat which really locks in that intensity of fruit, and then that coolness which just locks in that acidity, so you get that lovely balance. If I'm going to be critical, and obviously Hawke's Bay again, for me, grows the single greatest wine in New Zealand, and that is Te Mata Kolrang. It is a Cabernet Merlot. They're the only one of the four that can produce Cabernet to a world level standard, so that gives it a nod. But I have to give it to Marlborough. At the end of the day, if you're going to produce a variety that just absolutely blows the international competition out of the water, you have to be given a point for that. So that's 2 now for Hawke's Bay and 3 for Marlborough. On the subject of the wines produced in each region, there has to be a category for the how would I describe this? The cool factor, if you like, the consumer impression. Likes of Champagne. You can argue whether it's the best producer of bubbles or even the best value, whether you can get something of a equivalent or better value from elsewhere, like Italy with its Franciacorta or the Spanish Cava or what have you. I'm not going to go into which one's better in that situation, but in New Zealand there is one wine that really has piggybacked, or one style of wine I should say, that has really piggybacked off this whole theme of a brand of, while the wines are really good, the hype makes these wines even better, and that's Central Otago. Central Otago Pinot Noir is head and shoulders above every other region's trump card, if you like, as far as perceived quality and excellence. And so Central Otago has to get a point for that. And so that's 1 for Central Otago, 3 for Marlborough, 2 for Hawke's Bay. Let's keep going. Okay, next probably is size of the region. Now, in this one, this is probably subjective too. Is it the smallest region or the largest region that gets the point for this? For me, because I'm all about quality, driving quality and excellence, I have to go with the smallest region. And for this, it's an easy win to Martinborough. Martinborough gets a point. Me being a little bit egalitarian and wanting a level playing field, at least everyone getting on the board, I have to give Martinborough a point. So again, that's Marlborough with 3, Central and Martinborough with 1, and Hawke's Bay with 2. Our next category that we're going to judge these regions on is the history, is the longevity and how long they've been producing and everything else. Now, the ironic thing with all of this is that they all started around the same time. They all had grapes planted in their area roughly around the same time. However, one has continually produced wine since then, right through till now, and that is Hawke's Bay. So Hawke's Bay gets the easy W there. So that's 3 for Hawke's Bay, 3 for Marlborough, 1 each for Martinborough and Central Otago. Next, we're going to talk about the overall price point of each region's wine. Which region commands the highest price point for their wines? Now, and we're talking average. We're not talking who produces the most expensive wine or who produces the highest amount of most expensive wines, because obviously some of these regions produce a lot more than the others. So we're talking about the average spend that people are willing to pay, not what they could pay, what they are willing to pay. And this is something that I've known for years because of my years in retail, and where people are happy to spend that extra money and get what they feel is quality because they've spent that extra money. And, going through Marlborough is a region where they want bang for buck. They don't want to spend a lot of money. They don't think they should spend a lot of money to get something from Marlborough. They believe that Marlborough should be an entry-level price point. So fortunately, Marlborough doesn't win this category. Next, Hawke's Bay. Hawke's Bay, while they have some very expensive wines, they also have some cheaper wines. Being a bigger producer and the accessibility of the wine means that they can't really command as high a price as others on average, which is a little bit frustrating when you consider the quality that does come out of there. Same with Marlborough. Next is Martinborough, and the reason why it sits a little higher than Hawke's Bay is really because of the size of their yields and the amount of wine they actually produce. Tiny amounts, so the wines have to sit a little higher. And obviously that leaves Central Otago, which people are more than happy to spend up to get something from Central because they believe that price equals quality from Central, which they have a point, and that's just why they do that. And so easy win to Central Otago. So now we've reached the point where Hawke's Bay has 3, Marlborough has 3, 2 for Central Otago and 1 for Martinborough. And the tiebreaker, if you like, is we're going to review and rate the last 4 wines. So the wines that represented each of these areas in the last 4 episodes, they will be rated and scored, and whoever gets the greatest scores will be the winners. Now to reveal my scores on the wines that I reviewed over the last month, and this will determine who has the best wine region in the country. What region is the best? First, we're going to start off with Marlborough and the Whitehaven Sauvignon Blanc. Now, this wine, its varietal characteristic is picture perfect. It has it in spades. You want a Sauvignon Blanc, you try this, you've got a Sauvignon Blanc. So there is no doubting what it is, and the score I give it is 88 out of 100. Sorry, 89 out of 100. Sorry, my little spelling mistake.
Just taking a quick pause in the episode to remind you to like, subscribe, comment, and come and follow me on socials too.
Okay, now to reveal my ratings for the 4 wines that I reviewed over the last month, and this will determine once and for all who has the greatest region for wine in New Zealand. So first off, we have the Whitehaven Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough. Now this super varietal, it ticks all the boxes. You will open this, you'll drink this, and you'll go, yes, this is Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough. Very happy. And for that, well, not just that, it is a score of 89 out of 100. Very, very good wine. What stops it from breaking that 90 barrier is the fact that it doesn't offer more. It is straight up and down, exactly what it says on the bottle. And so that's why it gets the 89 point score. Very, very high, but not that top echelon, which just offers that something more than just the variety. Next, we will go to Martinborough, and Martinborough was represented by Palliser Estate Pinot Noir 2023. This wine, again, ticked all the boxes, hit all the marks it needed to do, and as I mentioned in the Martinborough episode, was a very pleasant surprise because this wine has always underwhelmed me in the past, but thanks to it being from a poorer vintage, if you like, it got the best fruit, and that really elevated it to another level. And that level is, just double checking, 93 out of 100. So, hits that top, well, not quite that top echelon, but hits that 90 plus bracket just because it offered that little layer more than just the Whitehaven Sauvignon Blanc. So this sits in first place at the moment. Next, go to Central Otago. Now, this was represented by Doctor's Flat. Doctor's Flat Pinot Noir 2022. Now, this wine has always been a favourite of mine, and again, hit the right notes, sung the right song, did everything it was supposed to do, and for that it got a 95 out of 100. So just breaking into that top echelon, that world-class category, but not any further. It's picture perfect, but I can't give it that extra bit because it just, it wasn't. I always describe the best wines that I taste like a symphony, and it's like there's a symphony in my mouth, and all the sections are filling it with the different parts and their layers. You've got the string section, you've got the woodwind section, you've got all these playing their part, and it's in perfect harmony and symmetry and synergy. This had everything but that, so that's why it hit that top bracket but didn't go further. Excellent wine, well worth hunting out, and yeah, love it. Last wine. Now, this is for all the marbles, because right now Central Otago is in front. If we look at the rankings per wine plus the scores it got earlier, it is sitting at the top. So it's all on the East Hope for Hawke's Bay, the Gamay Pinot Noir. Now, again, I love Gamay, and this one hits the mark. It is picture perfect Gamay. It really just sung all the right things. However, whether it's youth, whether it's, it's just the style just doesn't quite move further. Gets 93 out of 100, still an excellent score for a wine, but doesn't hit that top bracket to take that all-important crown. Just misses the Central Otago, and yes, so Central Otago number 1, Hawke's Bay number 2, and then there's Martinborough and Marlborough just behind them. So that's the result. Central Otago is number 1, and yeah, a little bit of a surprise, but we know that is always, yeah. That wraps up our episode looking at the best region for wine in New Zealand, and my bias is Hawke's Bay. I will admit that. I am just over the hill from Hawke's Bay. It's a couple hours away, so it is the local wine region, and I love the wines that come out of there. But when you weigh it up with all those factors that we looked at and the wine that represented it, sure, you could argue it is the oldest wine that was in the category. It is the most expensive wine that was reviewed in the last month. It should win, and it did. And that's, you could argue that it's not a fair fight, but that's what it is. And these are the wines that represented it. And one thing, each of these 4 wines are perfect examples of these wines from these regions. And sure, if I was really looking for a Hawke's Bay wine that really hit the brief of what they do well, what their trump cards are, I would have gone with a red like a Merlot Cabernet or a Cabernet Merlot, perhaps even a Syrah. But as I said in the episode, Hawke's Bay is not just a one-trick pony. It is able to do everything very, very well, and that's why that one was selected, and that's why I do love Hawke's Bay as a wine region, even though I know that Central Otago, for a lot of you out there, is the premier wine growing region in the country, so I'm not surprised that it did win. So yeah, that's all we have for this week. Thank you always for joining us. Santé, Borak, yeah.